Jim and Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I hadn't caught the first season, so when this came about and I finally got to see this, man, I was so surprised. I love this show. This animated series is so good. Can you tell me a little bit about? Let's start with what can we expect from a second season, especially now that Alex, their dad, is not made of stone.
You want to take this one, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, what we wanted to lean into two things. Number one, first season is a lot of laying foundation, laying the pipe, creating the rules of this world, creating this world. And in the second season, we're able to push things from there, because once you have the established foundation, you can go. But in addition to just specifically the Alex part of the puzzle, we just really liked the idea of playing with the fish out of water aspect, whereas his family trying to rescue him became a well-oiled machine, and they had things like down, and then he gets into the mix and he's like, okay, let's do this, and they're like, no, that's not how it works, dude. Like, you know, so like he just feels like he's not in place within his own family. So we really wanted to play with how does he fit into this already well-oiled machine.
And also, like with the first season too, it was pretty well established what the problem was. I mean, bam, he's turned to stone, you're cursed. How do we free Dad? We really like the idea in the second season. The characters and the audience aren't entirely sure what the problem is or what's going on, so that there's like almost a whodunit aspect to it, or more of a mystery of even what is transpiring. So it was a lot of fun to go, okay, let's build this in such a way that the audience has to go through the entire season to truly understand what's been happening.
Yeah, it's a really fun ride, and because Alex is really the newcomer, it's almost easy for me to go, I think he might be the problem. But I think some of the kids feel that, one of the kids feels that too, especially in the first episode. Right at the end, there's like that little side eye. So with that, you're talking about laying the foundation. One of the things I was really curious about is getting the opportunity to get a second season and maybe beyond, because it's not so often that shows often get so much time to be able to develop, and like you said, a foundation is really important. Apple, by the way, I think has been very supportive of a lot of its shows, letting them develop and gain that fan base. What does it mean to you guys to have that confidence from the studios, from the streaming service, to continue to tell these great stories?
Yeah, I mean twofold actually. Number one, yeah, it was an insanely supportive situation, but it was also kind of a trust on all sides type of thing, because we were kind of an untested entity to them, and so we just have always been very gracious that they trusted in us. As much as the trust goes the other way to the studio, you need the studio to trust you. And so I think the first season, everybody was building that trust and building that foundation, not just in a story form, but also in a relationship form. So I think by the time we got to do the second season, we all felt very comfortable with each other enough that they were gracious enough to let us push a little bit more, because they trusted us and we trusted them. And so there was that mutual trust, let things push, and you want to push in a second season, or you want to push some boundaries. And so there really was a relationship there that was really wonderful, that they let us go where we wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, like in season one, it's funny, even when we pitched the show initially, we had said something like a la Scooby-Doo, and it was funny, the head of DreamWorks TV was like, well, this isn't like Scooby-Doo. And you're like, no, we 100% agree, but there's nothing out there that's like it. So we didn't know what to compare it to. I mean, the nice thing about, like, when you're talking about things in the second season, you could actually refer to the first season tonally wise, going like, oh, we're talking about more like this, episode 5 or whatever, like, oh, okay. And it's just a huge difference between not being able to compare to anything and at least being able to compare to your earlier self.
Now, with that, what I like about it is kind of the episodic feel of them, and how the different artifacts really play a role. I really like the second episode in in the second season, just because I love board games and things like that. So the die was really cool to me. Tell me, what are maybe some of the inspirations behind some of these episodes or some of the artifacts? Because I find it really fascinating the way that you guys are able to really piece that all together to really make a cohesive season.
Well, I will say that in a lot of ways, it's less about finding out which artifacts to do, and it's more about carving down the ones to do. Like, we had so many ideas and so many artifacts, and we have a list of a couple hundred different artifacts and news stories and things that we had to carve down. But what's really specifically fun about this episode or this season is Coop and I really wanted the writers to tell their personal stories. And so there's a few episodes in there that the writers really were passionate about this story, and we wanted them to go with that. And so there's a lot of deeply personal stories. I mean, yes, it's all done in like a fun one way, but if you really peel back a layer, especially well, I won't say specific, I don't want to spoil, but it's like if you look at some of the middle episodes, there's some very personal stories written by those writers, and to us that was really wonderful to let them just to see that them bring that passion to it.
Yeah. And I mean, it was interesting too. And in building it as a season, that was also a fun group effort too, where one of the writers, we had like let's just call it like the murder board, where it was like up, and every episode and literally every character and every sort of like subplot, and there would be a card, and we'd be able to follow things through. So it became this wonderful puzzle that we were building, where it was sort of like, oh, you know what? We wanted this to be the 6th episode. That really should be the 7th episode. So then we could do this and that. And that was just fun, because it was like we were building, and even down to the production of it, like sets you'd build, or, characters you would build. How can we incorporate them? Oh, we have this cool thing. How can we use this? How can we make it bigger? And just building it as such.
Yeah, and speaking, staying on storyline, I think what I really liked about it is I almost call it like how I was describing it last night to my wife as a gateway to The Conjuring for the later years, because of the way that it's built. Can you tell me about it starts obviously with great writing, but balancing really that kid show with just enough horror to start maybe pushing the boundaries, but not just too much where it makes maybe parents uncomfortable or some kids, and to really make a great show like Curses.
Honestly, that is exactly where the open kind of multiple voice scenario of our writer's room and everything really came into be, because sometimes somebody would want to push something too far and another person would go, hey, wait a minute, pull back. Some person would put something and then it's like, well, wait, where's the horror in that? We got to push that up. So it really was like a lot of the first season was Coop and I balancing each other on that. More horror, more comedy, more adventure, more this, more that. But in this season, it really was such a collaborative group effort with the entire writer's room that it was a lot of that, self-policing almost, you know what I mean? And yes, there's some of us who are trying to push the scares as much as humanly possible. Then there's others that are much more stable minds who go, chill out.
Well, and one of the interesting things too that we actually haven't brought up, but is a huge part of things, are the storyboard artists, and the directors, because you'll get stuff back and you're like, oh, this is fantastic what they did with this moment, because there's a great example, without any spoilers, there's a Larry centric episode where there's a big dramatic like action set piece that in the script was literally 2 sentences long. You know what I mean? And by the way, that was like the first draft of that animatic came in like 10 minutes too long. We had to like chop it down because of that. And you're like, oh, it's 2 sentences. But the storyboard artist and the director is putting such this great sequence together. You're like, oh, here's it coming alive. And this is them bringing their sensibility to it. And By the way, that's also the most fun, getting those storyboards and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Where the, you have the movie in your mind, but then you see it come to life and you're like, it exceeds expectations.
Gentlemen, I'm glad you guys are having as much fun making the show as I am watching it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the insight on season 2 of Curses. It's fabulous, and I hope to guys talk to you again on a third.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Hey.
Nice to meet you both.